think it's an important one, and I would like all the listeners to think about this. You know, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about might sound really fantastic. You know, you're a Christian, and you're like, you know, are these guys serious? You know, they're talking about occultism and magic and necromancy and you know, people talking to the dead and, you know, all these weird things. Well, here's what I would put forth for you to think about. If you believe the Bible and you're a Christian, you know, I can understand that you can see a lot of nonsense going out in the world that claims to be supernatural, and there's a lot of fake stuff. But I'll tell you what, the devil doesn't counterfeit things that don't exist, okay? Counterfeiters don't print $3 bills, okay? Think about that. The devil's an imitator. He counterfeits the real thing, and he tries to you know, the strategy of the devil for a long time is pretty well described in that movie, The Usual Suspects, where it says the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was to convince the world he didn't exist. That's what he's been doing for the last 100 years or so. Well, what I'm talking about in my book, The Supernatural Worldview, is that is going to change. It's in the process of changing right now. And I present a lot of evidence that change has been going on and is reaching its culmination. The strategy is changing, and we're going to start seeing open manifestations of supernatural phenomenon in Western culture. Now, one thing that a lot of people aren't aware of is that it's never really stopped in the rest of the world. If you talk to missionaries that go to the third world, that go to really what is the majority world, the majority of the world is not like the West. You go to Indonesia, you go to Africa. These people are intimately aware of the supernatural realm, and they deal with it on a daily basis. Now, I've talked to several missionaries, and, you know, they tell me one of the missionaries that I talk to does deliverance every day and sees all kinds of dramatic, miraculous things going on. Christianity has become academic in the West, and it has become very dry, and it's become devoid of its supernatural power. But there really is quite a bit of supernatural power that still occurs. You just have to look for it. One of the evidences I put in the book is a healing. And the reason I did it is because it's the sort of evidence that can speak to somebody with a Western mindset, you know, someone who needs to see scientific evidence. And because that's just the way we're conditioned. You know, we're conditioned to be skeptics in our culture. But so there's this case of a young girl named Quayle Knight, okay? She had a massive brain tumor. And the thing that makes this case really strong is that she went in and got an MRI. And I put the scans, the photographs of the MRIs in the book just to show you this really happened. This was in 2008. This is an 11-year-old girl with a massive brain tumor. It covered nearly a fourth of her brain. Now, her mom was a member, you know, at a church where they believe in healing and laying on hands. And so between Friday, they went to church the next Wednesday. 30 or more people laid hands on Quayle, and they prayed. Okay, she went back for the surgery at a hospital in Dallas, I think the next Saturday, in preparation to do brain surgery to remove this tumor. Now, before they did the brain surgery, they had to take another MRI just to make sure that they had the location of the tumor right. And guess what? There was no tumor. Okay. The doctor, I have the quote from the doctor right here. Here's what the doctor said. It's got to be a mistake. It has to be. We're going to have to schedule another test. There's no way it's just gone. And so, you know, you can imagine this doctor's just kind of stuttering. And then they did another test. The doctor ended up saying, this is a miracle. This has to be an act of God. I mean, literally a tumor. And I have the before and after pictures from the MRIs from the hospital where you see this massive tumor, and then like 7 days later, it's absolutely gone. And this is from laying on hands and praying. You know, this is really hard for people to believe. Even a lot of Christians don't believe that these sort of miracles still happen, but they absolutely do. And people that are on the mission field see them on a regular basis. There's something about when the gospel enters a new area, it just seems like the Holy Spirit really empowers it more. And I think it has to do with belief as well. You know, if you recall, you know, when Jesus was in his hometown, he didn't do miracles because of their unbelief. This is right in the Gospels. Does that mean that he couldn't do it or that he wouldn't do it? You know, I think it's more like he wouldn't do it because of their unbelief. I think that he had the power, but he's not interested in performing for skeptics. God is not in the business of trying to convince people who don't believe in him just to satisfy their skeptical demands. Like when the Pharisees would demand a sign, he said it's an evil generation that demands a sign. But when the gospel is entering a new area, especially one that's demonically oppressed, like when they're in rural India, where they have the 330 million gods of Hinduism, which I think are demons, you know, that are ruling these folk Hindus in these areas. When these missionaries come in there, it's high spiritual warfare. So you see healings, you see deliverance, and you see dramatic supernatural manifestations coming, and the missionaries will tell you the stories. I interviewed a scholar from Biola University. This guy's got a THD in New Testament, but he's a missionary in Indonesia. He told me when he's there, it's not unusual for him to do 10 deliverances in a week. And, you know, it's just a regular occurrence. And he also does them here in the United States. And I had some of the discussion in the book. Dr. Sappington said he does deliverance in America. And, you know, I thought it was really interesting that he told me invariably he finds a lot of ties to Freemasonry with people in America that are demonized. That somewhere in their family line there's Freemasonry. And just really interesting that that's what he said. I didn't even ask him about that. That's just what he came out with.